Hey there, Colts fans. This is Nathan Brown, your Colts insider with the Indianapolis Star, here for our midweek edition of the Colts Cover-2 Podcast. A lot to break down today, as there has been really for the last month when it comes to the Colts and the quarterback position there. Between Joel and I, my co-beat writer on the Colts beat for the Indy Star, Joel A. Erickson, we spoke to all four healthy quarterbacks, or remotely healthy quarterbacks, I should say.
Three healthy quarterbacks and one IR quarterback.
Yes. And there was even another IR quarterback in the locker room today. We spoke to four of them. And that'll kind of help lead our podcast today. A lot to talk about with three of them, and worth a mention when we get to the end on undrafted free agent rookie Seth Hennigan, who was added to the Colts practice squad today, who could very well be on the active roster come Sunday in Houston. But before we get to him, the news today, of course, Colts confirm that rookie 6th round draft pick Riley Leonard will be the Colts starter for the season finale in Week 18 on the road at Houston. Should mention the number one defense in the league and a team that is still at the moment fighting for an AFC South title. So plenty to play for the Texans, and that defense, especially a tall task coming here for Riley Leonard. The Colts ultimately make the decision to hand the rookie the reins when it comes to the quarterback position. Phillip Rivers will remain with the franchise and be, I guess you would say, kind of an elevated quarterback coach of sorts. He'll be running the scout team during practice. He'll be mentoring Riley Leonard on the side. And if Seth Hennigan can get a handle on the playbook, Hennigan will be the Colts' number 2 quarterback on Sunday, and Rivers will be their emergency third quarterback. And if not, Rivers will at most be the backup, and hopefully for everyone's sake, not have to go to him as Riley Leonard takes his first snaps as a starter in the NFL. The biggest news at hand there, Leonard getting the starting role over Phillip Rivers. We learned about this yesterday, wrote about it, and then got it confirmed today from Colts head coach Shane Steichen. Joel, your initial reaction when we saw this starting to come together over the last couple of days?
Yeah, Phillip said today, it's one of those things that just made sense. And I kind of think, there's been a question in our media room about, did Phillip want to play? I think this was the joke. I think this joke is fine for the podcast, but I think if you told Phillip, or if you went and asked Phillip at 6:30 p.m. On July 4th, after he spent an entire day at his beach house with his family playing with the kids, and he's just eaten, say, 4 hamburgers off the grill, and you said, "Hey, Phillip, I know it might not be the best time, but there's an NFL game being played in Mobile. Do you want to start?" He's gonna want to play. He loves it that much. So I do think he wanted to start. He didn't say that explicitly today. He kind of said, but he did say it was up to them. He wanted to make the decision. This is a guy who truly loves the Wednesday portion of the week. That's the week. That's the busiest day of the week for them. They have the longest meetings. That's where they install everything for the game plan. It's a really heavy work day. I don't know that every player is like, yeah, you know what I really like? I really like Wednesday. But that's what Phillip Rivers' favorite thing coming back was. So yes, I do think he wanted to start. It never really made sense for anybody other than Riley Leonard to start, though, given that the Colts are out of the playoffs. And Phillip Rivers has already said that this is his last season. It's obviously not Riley Leonard's last season. So if he's going to have a chance to be a backup in the league, this is a very valuable spot to be in.
Yeah, this felt like it was a week or so in the making. I mean, we got a little bit of ahead of this even last week when we began asking Shane Steichen about the team's quarterback plans for the last 2 weeks of the year. I believe it was probably in last week's Wednesday press conference with Shane, where we already knew going into that they had committed to Philip for Sunday afternoon home game against the Jaguars, but we began asking him questions about, if the Texans clinched that final non-AFC North related playoff spot in the AFC, would you guys entertain making any sort of a change there for the Jaguars game? And he said, no, that wouldn't be fair to Riley, with the insinuation, obviously, that if the Colts no longer had anything to play for from a playoffs perspective, would the Colts hand over the starting spot to their rookie 6th-round pick, Riley Leonard, over having Philip Rivers start? Philip having been brought in because the Colts felt like he gave them the best chance to make kind of a Hail Mary playoff push after they were where they were with when Daniel Jones went down with his torn Achilles on December 7th in Jacksonville. But he would also not commit to anyone specific starting the season finale. And so that I think told us a little bit there, that Philip wasn't just the guaranteed, no questions asked starter for these final four games. And so when the Texans win on Saturday and when Philip goes and plays on Sunday, and Shane Steichen says in the press conference after the game on Sunday that there are conversations to be had and that, there will be a decision on Tuesday. It just kind of felt like this is where we were headed, that, that they had to have the proper conversations and that there wasn't any reason to have those talks last week when there was still a chance that the Colts could be in the running for a playoff spot. But when it came down to it, I think I would agree with you there. I think if the Colts asked Philip and said, we will do whatever you want to do, I think Philip Rivers is probably still starting, because he's not going to turn down an opportunity to start an NFL game, especially when he knows that this one would definitively be his last ever, because I don't think he's taking another phone call if someone calls in early December of next year. But the Colts ultimately felt like this is their chance to get a great look at Riley Leonard, who'd played 3 quarters of meaningful football back in December, on a week where he does incredible preparation. He's been meeting, even before Daniel Jones got injured, been meeting with Daniel Jones every single week to go over the playbook, to go over the schemes and kind of quiz each other back and forth. And but even at that point, I can't imagine that you are really truly ready for something like that until you've gotten a full week of preparation under your belt and you know that you're going to be the starter and you're mentally and physically and emotionally prepared for something like that. And so this gives Riley that best opportunity to succeed. Unfortunately, it's against the best defense in the league, so we will see what he can handle with that. But if the Colts are considering doing any sort of shakeup to that quarterback position heading into 2026, not knowing if Daniel Jones will be ready, not knowing if Anthony Richardson will be fully healthy from an eyesight perspective, I think you want to go into next season knowing where Riley Leonard stands. Yes, one game isn't going to tell you everything, but it's going to be better than nothing. And I think if he performs well, you could see him have an opportunity to legitimately compete for a week 1 backup role.
Yeah, I think there were a couple things. So one of the things about us talking to the 4 quarterbacks, we'll give you a little inside the locker room type of thing. Nathan and I went in today knowing that I was going to talk to Rivers. And the original plan was that Nathan was going to talk to Riley. But Philip and Riley were going to be large scrums. A scrum, just for those of you who don't know, like if you've ever seen a picture of like a bunch of us standing around a locker kind of packed in on top of each other, that's a scrum. That's what we refer to as a scrum. But those were going to be large scrums that like we weren't going to miss. You weren't going to miss them by being somewhere else in the locker room. Anthony Richardson and Seth Hennigan, on the other hand, I believe you're the only one to talk to Seth?
Correct. I believe so. Yeah.
And Anthony was kind of in and out. He was going to the training room. He was doing other stuff. And so it turned out that like our initial plan kind of went to heck because I was talking to Philip. And luckily we weren't both talking to Philip because Anthony came in and I think you ran him down and got some very interesting stuff there that we'll get to here in a little bit. But anyway, that meant that you didn't get to be there for Riley. So I've got a couple of takeaways from Riley Leonard that I think are important and interesting. Number one of my big takeaways is I don't think Riley felt as good about the way he played against the Jaguars as everybody else did. I think for a lot of people, including me, his performance against the Jaguars was kind of like, hey, that's better than I really expected him to play. He had some bad referee luck. The interception he threw probably should have been a simultaneous possession catch for Michael Pittman. It was kind of but at the same time, and this is something that came up when they did the evaluation with the quarterback battle. They get graded on where the ball goes and when it comes out, and did they make the right decision? And I'm reading between the lines here. But his answer about the Jacksonville game, I said, what did you learn from the Jacksonville game? And he said something along the lines of, well, there was some good, some bad, a lot to learn from it. And I kind of got the impression that there was some stuff he left on the table in that game. And that I think that maybe informs the decision to continue with Phillip Rivers the last 3 weeks. If Leonard is kind of intimating and hinting that there were stuff there, I think there are other people who have pointed out that some of the, some missed opportunities on short throws, him holding the ball, some of it, but having Riley kind of say, kind of like I said, kind of indicate that there was something there is an interesting piece of it. Because like I said, I kind of felt like he played better than expected in that first one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shane said it. I think there are several receivers, maybe even linemen in the locker room after that Jacksonville game. Admittedly, a very emotional, dejected locker room. But when we asked them about Riley's performance at the time, the phrase that I felt like we either heard verbatim or some version of was, under the circumstances, Riley played pretty well. And I think if you're someone who competes their way to being a quarterback on an NFL roster, good under the circumstances isn't going to be good enough for you. You know that perfection is never going to be possible in a large volume in this league, but you want to do well. Not just to do well for a rookie and for someone who's in a spot, stand-in performance, in the rain, all those caveats that you could certainly give Riley there about that performance. I think the stats from that, he was 18 of 29 for 145 yards, one rushing touchdown. That interception that you mentioned, I think you could probably argue shouldn't have been an interception, potentially a passing touchdown that got called back, I think, for an offensive pass interference, if I remember correctly.
Very questionable.
Yes. So that there are some pretty quick ways in which that stat line looks and feels a little bit different. I mean, you tack on a couple catches, one of them being not an interception and one of them being a touchdown, and maybe we feel even a little bit more positive, just generally speaking, about that performance. But it certainly felt like that was about as well as you could hope for Riley Leonard. Not like a wow, Riley did a really great job type of performance, but I think, or at least I would imagine, having essentially 4 weeks between that game and getting on the field on Sunday to absorb the teachings from that, go over film, have an additional great quarterback mind to talk to in all of these meetings for the last month in Phillip Rivers, along with Daniel Jones, who we should mention is around the facility. We saw him in the locker room today. We've seen him in the locker room or in the weight room or at practice for a couple weeks now, since he underwent his surgery for his torn Achilles. Daniel's, from everything that I think we have been told or observed ourselves, is as present as you would expect him to be if he was a starter. And so Riley now this week, knowing he's going to be the starter, now has a chance to lean on Daniel Jones and Phillip Rivers, and to a lesser extent, Anthony Richardson, his offensive coordinator, Jim Bob Cooter, Shane Steichen. I think you've got about as good of a support system as you could ask for if you're Riley, a rookie going into your first start.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure I got the other sentence in here that kind of told me that maybe this wasn't the best start for him, or that he didn't feel like it. The other thing was, I think one thing I can do is learn from the bad and fix those things up a little bit. It was just kind of gave me the vibe of, there's some stuff here. I think one of the other interesting thing that I wanted to get to in this pod, and it's in the story too, but I asked him, where do you think you've grown the most this season? Which is kind of that's kind of a basic question. It's open-ended on purpose. I asked those because I really care what Riley thinks. I don't want to lead him in any direction. I didn't want to ask about X's and O's or something. But the interesting thing to me is that I think he had a different answer than really I was expecting, and really than I think I maybe have ever heard from a player in this situation. He said the emotional side of it is the biggest thing that he's learned from this year. He cited Daniel Jones being as steady as it gets. He said, I remember when we started off the season really, really well, and this is something that just in terms of learning from a veteran, Riley has kind of always been around whenever we've been interviewing Daniel Jones, kind of listening. He alluded to that, and he said, if you heard him answering questions and the way he prepared, you couldn't tell if we won or lost. It was the same every week. And then he said the other thing with Phillip, emotionally speaking, is that Phillip kind of reminded him, like he reminded all of us, of the beauty of football and just sort of the reason why you play the game and the love of playing the game. And that helped, I think, crystallize some stuff for Riley Leonard, because when you're a rookie, you're dealing with a whole bunch of stuff you've never seen before. You're not playing. He's playing scout team. He's trying to learn the offense at the same time. He's trying to watch Daniel Jones. It's a lot of stuff, and then you're not playing, so you're not getting that game release that you used to get in college. And he kind of said, gave the impression that having Phillip around reminded him, hey, yes, you want to do your work, you want to do everything right, but you want to enjoy it, because you didn't think you were going to be here. You didn't know you were going to be here. You didn't know, when he transferred from Duke to Notre Dame, there was no guarantee that he was going to make the NFL. It definitely was going to help, but there was no guarantee. And it was just a really interesting, reflective answer from Riley Leonard that I think is an indicator of his maturity, and also why the Colts like him as a backup quarterback, developmental backup quarterback. We can get into, and we probably will on Sunday night after the game, whenever we have a chance to pod, some of his physical limitations and the way he plays the position and what he has to learn. But I think one of the other things that sticks out about guys who are backups in the league for a long time is that they have the right kind of mentality. And I think Riley Leonard, based on what we've seen from him, what we've heard from him, how he's approached being the number 3 quarterback, that's why they took a 6th round pick on him, because he's got that. He has all of the stuff you want to have make up from a backup type quarterback. And the question is, can he play well enough? And that this doesn't mean can he start, because I think most reasonable Colts fans know by now there's only so many starting caliber quarterbacks in the NFL. But can he play well enough when he has a spot start that you feel good about him as your number 2? We might start to get an answer about that. But all of the emotional, the leadership, the support of, I think the support of the starter is a big thing. I remember when Nick Foles was here, and whatever you think of the 2022 season and the way Nick Foles played, you have to look at Nick Foles' career over the course of it and say, this guy probably knows a lot about backup quarterbacking. And he said, when you're the backup quarterback, everything you do is in service of the starter. And so some of the other stuff we learned about Riley today, that he was always with Daniel Jones all season. When Daniel was doing stuff outside the facility, Riley was there. He's been watching him all year. That he gets what the backup quarterback is supposed to be. And now he gets a chance to find out, can I play? That's the hard part is, can you play at this level to be a number 2?
And I think we've seen this year, I don't want to use too much hyperbole here, but it really feels like we have seen several teams in the league put in a position where their backup quarterback has to play some notable snaps and even start some notable games. I mean, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of the Ravens. I'm thinking of the Packers, the Texans, the 49ers, the Colts, obviously. There's probably even some more that I'm forgetting here. And those are just teams that are, outside the Colts that are going to be in the playoffs. The Chiefs are another one who obviously saw Patrick Mahomes go down. In this game, we're starting to, for whatever reason, at least it feels like, see some quarterbacks not go down necessarily for the season, but you're going to see some quarterbacks miss a couple games, and in playoff races that can be incredibly tight for that final wild card spot, or for a divisional matchup, which could be the difference between, say, having like a first or second seed and a fifth or sixth seed. In this day and age, having a backup quarterback who is reliable and can lead a team, and who knows the offense well and can actually go and win an NFL game against various levels of competition. I mean, that can, if you get those opportunities, I mean, we're starting to hear it now with Mac Jones from San Francisco or Malik Willis from Green Bay. I mean, that can, if you get those opportunities and perform in them well, that can give you a chance to elevate yourself to being considered for a starting job the next year. Again, we don't necessarily think of Riley in that light right now, but if you can be a reliable, solid backup quarterback in this league, it seems like the odds are, at some point, if you're on a team for a couple of years, you're probably going to get a chance at some point. And so being trusted and relied upon for a job like that can have its benefits, and it's still very important. I mean, ultimately, the Colts, I think, are probably in the position that they're in right now. I think you could make the argument, because they didn't really have a backup quarterback when Daniel Jones initially got hurt. We don't, this would take some deep hypothetical and introspection that I'm not sure that anyone in a decision-making role in the Colts would tell us. But I think there's reason to wonder if, when Daniel Jones came down with his fractured fibula, that seemed like it was really bothering him in the couple games that he played all the way through, if Anthony Richardson had been healthy and ready to go against, say, Kansas City, or at home against Houston, there's part of me that wonders if the Colts would have had Richardson start those games and give Jones just a couple weeks for that to heal, because we had been told before Daniel tore his Achilles that the Colts believed that fractured fibula could get better, even playing on it over the course of 3 or 4 weeks, and that Daniel would feel better by the end of the season than he did there in late November, early December. So there is part of me that wonders. Now, I don't know if they would have been able to make this decision knowing that there's some more variability maybe in having Anthony start versus having Daniel admittedly hobbled, but maybe a little bit more reliable. But I mean, there's part of me that wonders if that would have been on the table, and that they didn't really have that, because handing those starting reps off to Riley, someone who hadn't gotten any meaningful snaps in the NFL, I think was really going to tank your odds of being able to hang in some of those games. They ultimately go with Daniel. We don't know, and I don't think we'll ever know, if playing on that fractured fibula had any sort of direct lead to tearing his Achilles. But he, I don't think there's any question that he was playing a little bit hobbled, and the Colts ultimately lost those 2 games by combined 7 points. And you wonder what might have been had a true backup quarterback still been healthy and on the roster.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into the quarterback that you talked to. So this is where you've got more insight than I do, because the other thing is, like, both of us I think we're usually aware of the interviews the other person does, but there's a feel to it. I think most people can understand that. Like you're having a conversation, you get words that people say maybe don't always have the same impact as when you see their facial, their body language, that kind of thing. But Anthony Richardson is not going to be activated. The Colts are still concerned about his visual limitations, and there's some stuff here that I think needs to be cleared up. I don't know if the people who haven't. I kind of think that the people who are still asking me these questions online we're not paying attention to some of our podcasts because we've talked about this ad nauseum. But there was some confusion where people believe that Richardson said he had no limitations a couple of weeks ago when he talked. That is definitely not what he said. He had said he had no major limitations, which by definition means there are some limitations. He was more forthcoming about those limitations today. And to me, it explains why the Colts are not activating him. I think maybe reasonable people can disagree, but once you kind of lay it out there, I'll say why I think this makes sense to me.
Yeah. So we've seen people online who just have this theory that the Colts and Shane Steichen in particular just have it out for Anthony Richardson, and they don't want him to start. They don't trust him, and I don't know that any of that really plays into at all what this decision is. I mean, you can theorize, what the Colts believe, Anthony's ceiling is, or what they think of the work that he's done on the field. But I do think it's fair to say if he had been healthy when Daniel Jones came down with his torn Achilles, I have to think that he would have just been the guy that would have been in there ready to start. And I don't know that they necessarily go and call Phillip Rivers. Ultimately, he was still on IR and didn't even return to practice until 1 week after Rivers had made his first start for the Colts. And when he did return to practice a couple weeks ago, Colts head coach Shane Steichen told us that there were still vision limitations, as you mentioned there, for Anthony. He's undergone 2 weeks of practice. But ultimately, the Colts still feel like those limitations are important and impactful enough where they don't feel comfortable putting him out in a game situation. He's been leading the scout team over the last couple weeks. Shane Steichen said today that from a physical standpoint, when you're talking about throwing the ball, rushing, scrambling, like Anthony doesn't have any limitations when it comes to any of those gifts that he has on the field that are specific to his game. But when it comes to, frankly, one of the most basic things that a quarterback is in charge of doing on the field, taking snaps, that is something that Anthony actually admitted today is something that he is still struggling with. I will read the direct quote because it was, it was somewhat surprising. I was as we were listening to Phillip talk, I kind of had my recorder out, but was looking right toward Anthony's locker because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss him. And when he was back out there, went over and grabbed him and got a chance to talk with him for 5 minutes or so, along with a couple other reporters who wandered over. And one of the first questions that we asked him, and this was coming off of having already talked to Shane today, was trying to clarify a little bit of what those visual limitations still were. And he was asked, so are there things that you don't see that you should on the football field? And he said, everything still feels normal. I think probably the toughest part for me right now is catching the snap. And that's just getting back into the routine after missing football for 2 months. He would go on to explain a couple times that the issues for him aren't things from a depth perception. He can still make deep throws. He can see receivers far downfield. The problem for him is what he called like a things within his box, essentially like a 1 foot radius around him. So you're thinking about receiving a shotgun snap when the ball is coming at you and knowing exactly where that football is. I also start to think about a little bit about a defensive lineman or a linebacker, and edge rusher, a safety, what have you, rushing, and not necessarily seeing that player coming at you right away, and then just kind of catching them out of the corner of your eye, or seeing them close to you and knowing where and how much you need to step up in the pocket. Those are things that I feel like when he's saying that he still has those short range visual limitations, those have to be the things that the Colts are concerned about when they would consider activating him and ultimately putting him in line to play. Frankly, Steichen kind of explained that as much in his press conference earlier in the day. I want to find the proper quote, but let me see if I can find it here. I think he said, think about it. If you don't have perfect eyesight and something happens, you don't see someone and get hit, that's not a good thing. And we just want to be smart with it. So the Colts essentially don't want to put him in a position where he's either in danger or where he's just not capable of doing some of the the minute details of being a quarterback in the pocket, where things have to be so precise and where you have to make such quick decisions. And part of those decisions you're making are with your vision and, just the instant connection of seeing something and doing something with your body. And that's the decision that they came to. Folks can agree or disagree with it. But that's where things stand now. And I mean, frankly, I applaud Anthony for seemingly being as open and honest with us and giving us a sense of where he is and where he still has some work to do to get those that vision back to be the quarterback that he was before this happened here in mid-October.
Yeah, I think, one of the other things is, obviously if you can see downfield, you feel like, I think some people would be like, well, he's fine then, he can see downfield. But like if you think about like all of the moments where the pocket is not collapsing, but where it's closing, and a quarterback has to step up through a closing pocket and get to a hole to give himself more space. All of those moments where a defensive lineman isn't really in sack position, but he's in a position where he can reach out and swat at the ball. Like these are things that Anthony is frankly very, very good at. Avoiding pressure and dealing with pressure and not navigating the pocket is sort of a natural skill for him. But it's a concern if when things get close to him that he has issues in that way. Mm-hmm. It's a significant concern, I think, because not just because of the hit, but also if you're going to put him out there, you want him to play at full strength. And I just don't know if you're having trouble with the snap. Like so another thing with the snap, and this is. So if you're having a little bit of trouble with the snap, and people are like, well, you just focus on the snap a little bit more. But this is a game that happens very, very quickly. You have to make reads very, very quickly. You have to be – a lot of the stuff that they do with Richardson is stuff that he is doing ball handling without looking at his hands, like zone reads and stuff like that. He has to be able to hand off. That is within his box. A running back – what if you're running a speed and when Taylor gets close to him, instead of handing it off to him, he's slamming into him and they're fumbling? Mm-hmm. That's within his box too. Like I don't think it would do, based on Anthony's own description of what he's dealing with, I'm not sure that it makes sense. I think it might be a disservice to Anthony himself to put him out there at this point. And, frankly, put him in a position where he might look bad for reasons that are outside of his own control.
Yeah, I even asked Anthony too if because Shane said that he had somewhat lengthy conversation in his office with Anthony yesterday, so on Tuesday, kind of probably around the time where the Colts were making decisions on their quarterback plans for this weekend. And I imagine the basis of that was telling Anthony ultimately that they weren't going to start him, that they were going with Riley, and the decision or the reasoning behind all of that. And I asked Anthony if it was frustrating to hear that he wouldn't, be given the opportunity just to see where things were, or just even to be named the backup. So in case something happened to Riley, that he would get that opportunity. And he said he wasn't frustrated, that frankly, doctors were impressed. I don't know that I want to say surprised, but just like impressed and pleased that he was even able to do what he's doing right now, given the injury and the impact to his eye and his face and his orbital bone. Like I don't know, for the folks that just think he should, the bone is healed and he should be back out there on the field. I don't know that. And this was, even before my time on the beat, but I feel like I have a decent handle on it. I don't know that people fully understand the severity of the injury that he sustained. And I think it's a genuine success that he is back out on a football field, that he's running around, that he can even see like mostly okay. I mean, it kind of sounds like, from a day-to-day perspective, I think he could probably, go out and live the daily life of a human like most of us, without really any issues. And it's, the precise movements and decisions and the touch of being an NFL quarterback that just is a little bit difficult, just like it would be difficult to us for far different reasons. But he was surprisingly upbeat when we talked to him today. I think he has been happy that he's gotten back on the practice field. He's going to be meeting with his doctors again for another checkup here next month. And he said that they still have every reason to think that this vision is, his full vision is going to come back in due time, and that this is just kind of all part of the process. And it's also something where there's not like a uniform timeline, because every impact to your eye is going to be different. It's going to come from a different angle. It's going to be with a different piece of shrapnel. It's all going to be a different experience. And so it's going to be a different injury. And there's still every expectation, from what he said, that he will be back to, to his old normal self. He even said, which I found kind of interesting, but I also know what his injury history has been here at the Colts in now 3 seasons. He said that he feels like this is the healthiest he's been going into an off season as a Colt, which tells you a little bit what he dealt with in his first and second seasons from a health standpoint. So he seemingly feels very positive and upbeat about just needing a little bit more time to get back, and now having a 6-month off season before you even think about starting training camp. I think he at least has reason to believe that he will be back competing for a role, in a quarterback competition somewhere in the NFL come next summer. He was also asked whether any of this has, led him to a place where he's thinking about whether his future will or won't be with the Colts. And there's been certainly a lot of speculation on that topic. He said he hasn't, at least he said publicly, he hasn't, let himself get to that place, but that he still believes he can be the quarterback that has the potential that he was drafted for. And Shane even said that he has faith that if Anthony gets that vision back, that he can be the quarterback that the Colts drafted him, believing that he could be a couple years ago.
Yeah. So much of that future stuff with like what his future is, it all depends on Carly Ursay's decision. What she does with these decision makers and stuff like that. But I did want to highlight, when you were telling me, what he said in the interview, I was just like, well, so I think we get to this point where there's limitation, and then you don't hear a lot about it, and then you find out that he's still having some trouble with the snap, and I think you find yourself thinking like, that's significant. That's something that I understand why you wouldn't want to put him out there. I think one of the other things is he admitted the first time that doctors initially told him that he would not be back this season at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and to sort of the conspiracy theory that this is Colts driven, like the stuff we're basing most of this on is Anthony's own words himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his description of not being able to catch the snap, his description of the box around him. And again, you know, doctors told him initially they thought he was not going to be able to play the rest of this season, that he's kind of ahead of the game just to be in there right now. It makes a lot of sense to me just with that description that I just, as a quarterback, like I'm even watching, like right now in the background, the Citrus Bowl's on, and Bryce Underwood just had a play where he took the snap and dropped back, and there was a defensive end swiping at the ball while he went to throw. And it's all of that's happening within that 1 foot box that he's talking about, that Anthony's talking about. And I think you don't think about all of those little things in the grand scheme of quarterbacking most of the time until you really start to hone in on what if someone's having trouble when something gets very, very close to them, you know? And if you watch a game, I think if you watch a game and look for all of that, how many times someone is close to them, moving around, there's someone in that space, I think you can understand why the Colts don't want to put Anthony Richardson out there right now.
Yeah. So we'll see what comes of that. I mean, there are lots of things to follow both here in the coming days and a week or so in terms of the Colts' future, but this is certainly something that I think will linger long on into the offseason in terms of what this team's future is at quarterback. Is it Anthony Richardson? Is it Daniel Jones? Is it another kind of standout backup from this year? I don't know how they would go any sort of direction in the draft that would lead to some long-term answer at quarterback, but they could always surprise us there. But that will play a major role in the direction and the potential of what this team can be in 2026 and beyond. And we'll follow that. Maybe a quick chance to touch on before we finish up here. Seth Hennigan. So I
was about to ask you if there was anything from Seth Hennigan we needed to
know. So he is this was one interesting thing that I don't think I even maybe fully and properly had correct in my head. So Seth Hennigan, if you recognize the name, he is a quarterback that the Colts did try out previously this year. I think I had in my mind, and maybe I just remembered this wrong, or it wasn't entirely clear, but Seth Hennigan was a quarterback that the Colts actually tried out earlier this month. He was a quarterback that the Colts actually brought in the day after Phillip Rivers had his workout on Monday evening, December 8th. I think there was some impression that the Colts had actually brought Rivers and Hennigan both in for a workout at the same time that Monday night. We know that Rivers gets the call from the Colts on the evening of December 7th while the Colts are still waiting to get out of Jacksonville after Daniel Jones has torn his Achilles, and Rivers takes the night to think it over, tells them on Monday that he's coming there. The Colts send the plane, and he gets on and gets right off, has a quick meeting with Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard, and then goes and throws in the field house. Seth Hennigan was brought into the facility the next day on that Tuesday. That Colts workout was one of 8 workouts that he had over the last couple months. He spent the offseason and training camp with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was an undrafted free agent, a rookie out of Memphis, where he played the bulk of his college career, and spent the first 4 weeks of the season on the Jaguars practice squad, but was released after that. And since then had been conducting workouts for, as it turns out, for 8 of the 32 teams in the league. Ultimately lands on the Colts radar again 3 or 4 weeks ago, and that just kind of goes to show you why, even if you don't get a phone call a day or two after a workout, why performing well at one of those can still mean a lot for a player's career, because he's the quarterback that when they were thinking, hey, we need to have someone else in the building that worst case scenario, we can hand the ball to and have some level of faith that we can go out and compete with. I know that the Colts worked out a handful of quarterbacks when they were looking to replace Anthony Richardson on the roster when Anthony went down in October. But Seth Hennigan is the guy that they go with. Shane Steichen told us in his press conference today, I think we touched on earlier, but probably is worth clarifying that if Seth Hennigan can get the playbook down well enough and feel confident going into the game, that if his number is called, if Riley gets hurt or something else happens to them where the Colts need to look to another quarterback, that Seth would actually be their number 2 on the depth chart come Sunday, and Philip Rivers would, it sounds like, still remain on the active roster, but probably go into Sunday as one of their handful of guys who are inactive. And then if it gets to that point where a team needs to go to a third quarterback, he would be your quote unquote emergency quarterback. So this is a big week for Seth Hennigan, just in terms of, if nothing else, impressing the Colts brass and showing them that he can learn a playbook on the fly, do what is asked of him, and basically just do enough to earn the chance to be a backup this week. For someone like him, who's an undrafted free agent, that can go a long way in terms of just trying to stick around in this league. It sounds like he's, excited for the opportunity. It's something very different to compete for, to basically just kind of almost compete against yourself to try and earn the opportunity to be a backup and likely not play on Sunday. But there's still, I think, a lot of pride and a lot of opportunity to do something like that, because that just, I think if you're in a position like his, just gives you a potential to be in good favor with a team. And if one team thinks highly of you, that can spread around the league pretty easily and gives him hopefully another opportunity to, stay on the radar for folks looking for another quarterback to bring to training camp or bring to OTAs or think of whenever they are needing to have another quarterback workout. So that's where things stand with him. I think there were some folks that were wondering, me included, quite frankly, when we see the Colts sign him to the practice squad earlier this week, whether that just meant that Philip Rivers wasn't going to stay with the team, because they had gone the last couple weeks since they had to waive Brett Rippon just ahead of the team's game against the San Francisco 49ers in order to make room on the roster for DeForest Buckner. The Colts had only had 2 healthy active quarterbacks on the roster. And so when you go and sign Hennigan on Monday, frankly, I wondered if that was a sign that Philip Rivers, not only wasn't going to be starting against the Texans, but if he was even going to remain with the team and Hennigan was going to outright take Rivers' spot on the roster. That we know now that's not the case. Philip said that he wants to finish this out. He wants to be here for Riley, wants to support him, and ultimately wants to, just finish out this 4-game stretch with the team, even if he's not going to be a starter. But there's still an opportunity for Seth Hennigan to have, a meaningful role on this team come Sunday, and we'll see how he progresses throughout the week of practice.
Shane also said that Philip is going to run the scout team.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot think of anything better or more fun, or however you want to put it, than lining up on defense and having Philip Rivers say, when we're in this look, you're supposed to be over there.
Yeah. Great asset for the quarterbacks this week. Great asset for the defense this week. He's kind of doing it all. And again, this is a game that, from a playoff perspective, means absolutely nothing to the Colts, but they still feel like there's a lot to be had on Sunday. And frankly, just the ability to go out and try to win a football game, which, again, they have not done in the United States since October 26th. They have not won a game, period, since November 9th in Berlin against Atlanta before they went on a bye. This team has not won a football game in a very long time, and even though it is a game that it doesn't mean a whole lot from a big picture standpoint, I know they would love nothing more than to to go out and do that and frankly play spoiler a little bit come Sunday against a division opponent that still very much has a lot to play for and has been a team that's been one of the hottest in the NFL for a couple months now.
Yeah. And really, I think when people have asked me a couple times, like what to watch in this game, it's really Riley Leonard. Mm-hmm. There's like anything else that happens. Like it would be nice, I think, if there's another play. Like this Michigan game is just like reminding me of all the times that a quarterback has someone right up under its body. This time it was Bryce Underwood running to the right, and he had to reach out. He had to take a hit and then reach out over the goal line as his body was passing over it. Sorry, that's an aside, but man, am I getting reminded of how much this could come into play. But in Jonathan Taylor, if he had a big game and wins the rushing title, I think that probably means something to Jonathan Taylor. I think some Colts fans would love to see that. There's some individual type stuff like that could happen, but realistically, like for big picture stuff, what will the Colts do in the future? That nothing really matters in this game other than what does Riley Leonard look like? Does that shape how they approach the backup quarterback position in the offseason? Other than that, I don't really know what else there is to really make a decision on, because like a lot of it definitely shouldn't affect Carly Ursay-Gordon's decision making, and below her, if she brings those guys back, I would assume that your evaluation is based more on the first 16 games than anything that happens this week.
Yeah, 100%. Be interested to see if Buffalo's James Cook does in fact play on Sunday. I don't entirely know all of the different playoff iterations, but I know I've heard some talk about Buffalo potentially resting Josh Allen, just to get him healthy and keep him ready for the playoffs. So I don't know if that would mean someone like Cook, who has not an insurmountable lead on Jonathan Taylor, but if he were to play and have a solid game, I think that would make it really tough for JT to make up that gap, but still very much a possibility for Jonathan Taylor, who hasn't had a 100-yard rushing game since Berlin on November 9th. For him to go out there and have a bit of a resurgent game, that's not going to be an easy thing to do against a Texans front seven that is just about as good as it gets. But something to play for there. Alec Pierce still maybe has an outside chance of getting to 1,000 yards. Tyler Warren, he's not going to quite reach some of the heights that we thought he might in terms of a rookie tight end from a historical standpoint, but
still 8th most receiving yards and 7th most catches all time going into the final.
Exactly. And
pretty good.
And I think there are some other rookie pass catchers too that, I don't know that he's going to be tops among those, but he can still have a good game. And I think still rank solidly among those guys. You've mentioned it either in writing or in podcasting or in both. The quarterback shakeup over the last couple months of the season, from Daniel Jones just not being 100% to them switching to Rivers, I think has really hurt him from a production standpoint, just in what the Colts are able to do with him when you have someone like Daniel who's so mobile, who can roll out of the pocket and find Tyler Warren. That was such a big part of him from being a versatile guy when the Colts were a little bit more limited from that standpoint. Yes, he could catch some shallow passes over the middle, but that limited the way in which you could attack this offense with Tyler Warren. So we'll see if he can do anything more with Riley Leonard, who admittedly is good with his feet, get on his feet. We saw that a little bit in the game against Jacksonville. We'll have to see what more of that we might be able to see here on Sunday. I think that's about it. Again, you might see some names that you haven't seen as much of playing. Shane hinted a little bit about that today. I don't know that I would expect, from what it sounds like, I don't know that I would expect Sauce Gardner to play on Sunday. Shane hasn't completely ruled that out, but I think he would have to feel like Sauce is truly 100% without a doubt healthy.
I got the impression that it's leaning no.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Shane on on Monday said that he wouldn't eliminate it, but basically Sauce would have to be really, really good. And I think he even said today that he would have to be 100%, and just doesn't seem like a guy that was held out, the last quarter and a half or so on Sunday is going to all of a sudden be 100% come Friday. So again, I wouldn't expect to see him play. They've Tanner Bortolini is still in concussion protocol. He's I think the Colts had a walkthrough today, and he was said to have been a full participant in practice. Had they had a full practice today, he'll ultimately get observed by an independent doctor on Friday and see if he can go or not. So that's someone else to keep an eye on. But that's those are the stakes going into last game of the year that I'm sure Colts fans wish had a lot more on the line for it. But this has just been a back half of the year that I don't know that anyone would have been able to predict for a team that was 7-1 and had the best record in the league and was 8-2 coming out of the bye, heading to Kansas City, seemingly with everything in front of it. But this is the way the NFL goes sometimes, and they will do what they can to get as good of a result as they can and head into this offseason on the right foot.
We can deal with the bigger picture questions when we have more clarity on what Carly Gordon wants to do.
Yeah, we will tape at some point on Sunday after the game. I am going to be navigating some travel back to Indy ahead of locker cleanout on Monday morning. I will be on the ground for us in Houston.
I'm holding back, so someone is on the con in case. For Colts fans who remember the timing of this, last year we got clarity on the situation on the future with Steichen and Ballard the night of the game. Mm-hmm. So probably best to have one of us stationary while the other one is moving.
And on the off chance that a flight gets delayed and
canceled.
Or canceled, and I'm stuck in Houston or Chicago on my way back. Probably good to knowing. For those who don't know, Monday will be the last chance that we get an opportunity to talk to players in a long time this offseason. So that's a chance to talk to guys, get their final impressions on what the season turned into, on their own performances this year, on their own futures if they're a notable free agent like say Alec Pierce, for example. And that all kind of kicks off around 9 a.m. on Monday morning. I am booked on a flight that leaves Houston 8 p.m. Central Time. I'm scheduled to get back into Indy a little after 2 a.m. So it'll be a little bit of a tight turnaround for me, but I hope to be there if travel all goes well on Monday. But if for some reason things get a little shaken up, that's why Joel is hanging back, and he will definitely be at the Colts facility on Monday. So we'll powwow and figure out how we can best pod to not only talk about what we see on Sunday, but hopefully what we learn about the future of this Colts team from a big picture standpoint on Sunday, or where we think things lie if we don't get that answer. I think we would also talk to Shane Steichen on Monday, and then have an opportunity hopefully later in the week to talk to Chris Ballard, and we will catch up with you guys on Sunday and see what more we know and what direction things are trending. But for now, have a happy new year, and we'll catch you guys again on Sunday.